Well, man, you got such a fascinating story. I'm looking forward to getting into it. But before we do, I want to know 4 years ago, we were trying to figure out this pandemic. How long is it going to last? The ramifications, all of that. How did you make it through that time period? And how did it change the way that you live your life now?
Yeah, the pandemic was interesting. I wasn't retired during the pandemic, so it was interesting from a law enforcement perspective because law enforcement couldn't take off. You had to go out there and still uh, work crimes in the city, respond to calls. That was an interesting time because the world kind of shut down. So from that perspective, it was difficult because you didn't know what was going on, and you had to be out there in the front lines and help people. Ultimately, there was no other choice, and you know, I'm glad that we were there for people to help. But personally, it was tough. I mean, it's just that's a long year with the mask mandates and all that to kind of lock down. It was odd, especially for a law enforcement officer that's used to being out there getting into it. That when you get off shift, you got to lock down at home. It was a little bit different, but I'm glad we're through it and on to the next stuff.
Absolutely. So let's get into the heart and soul. As an author and an officer, I want to get to the heart and soul of what you do right now on a daily basis. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day. One of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you
Yeah.
answer that child?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and I'm currently retired, just so you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
so I served a little more than 25 years with the Anchorage Police Department, which then you can retire in our department, which is kind of cool. But I'd explain to the third graders, just to bring it down, is that really law enforcement, we keep your community safe. If you need help, if your parents need help, if your family needs help, anything that goes on where it's a safety issue or a police issue, we come in and make sure that the community is safe. I would really dumb it down and answer it that way, because after all, we're kind of the front line in our country to keep everybody safe and our community safe. So that's how I'd answer it.
So talk to me about what you wanted to be when you were a kid. Was it always being in law enforcement?
That's an interesting one. My dad had some family back in Maryland, so we would travel from Anchorage to Baltimore once in a while to visit family when I was a little kid, probably 8 to 12 years old. And the Baltimore Orioles would play, and in Alaska, we don't have any professional stadiums. So as a kid, you're fascinated with these giant ballparks or football stadiums that house 70, 80,000 people. Our population in Alaska for the entire state's 700,000. So that's a lot of people in one area. But interestingly enough, at that time, my dad didn't have enough money to actually get us in the game to watch the Orioles. So he just drove us around the stadium, and the state trooper stopped us in the back of the stadium because we were in a restricted area. And my dad said, "Hey, I'm just showing the kids the stadium. I'll get out of here, no problem." And he's like, "Where are you from?" And then Alaska came out. The trooper was fascinated. So I remember he told us to park and get out, and we did, and he took us to this back door up these stairs, and you could see the whole ball field. We're in the back, the security portion. And he said the door self-locks on the way out, enjoy the game. And the trooper just left. And so as Alaskans, it was only the last few innings, but I was in awe as a kid. This guy in a uniform, I was like, wow, that's kind of like a superhero to me. So it kind of clicked at that point that I was like, man, that's something I like to do when I get older. And so I pursued it. But I always remember that trooper and how nice he was. And so in my career, uh, he doesn't know this, and I don't even know his name, but I really reflected to give back to the community and be that type of officer that, kids or anybody that interacted with would say, wow, that was a good experience. So really that's how it happened.
Wow, what a great story, man. What a cool way. And that's the thing about life. You just don't know what those little small things that you do and walk away from, how they can mushroom into something that's a career that you've had because of this.
Yeah, for sure. I like to thank him. I just don't know, who he
Yeah,
was, but he did a great job. So
that's wonderful. So talk to me about how you got into it. Talk to me about the beginnings of being an officer and how it evolved. And obviously, your book gets into that more. But is it kind of like politics where you get in there and there's this ideological notion of what you want to do, this way you want to shape the world, and then you realize, oh man, this is different from what I thought it was going to be?
boy, I think you hit it spot on. As a new officer, I started in 1996, 24 years old. I'm going to get into law enforcement. I'm going to end crime. It's over with in Anchorage, and I'm going to do my best and super excited. And I always maintained being excited and wanted to work for my community. But I did realize quickly, especially in the world of narcotics, uh, that I would go out and arrest these low-level narcotics dealers, and I think I'd really solve the world's problem. Like I just arrested Pablo Escobar. I quickly realized that I wasn't even making a dent in the drug trade, and it just keeps perpetuating itself and keeps growing. So, however hard I battled, that's one area that I was always frustrated because you couldn't slow, the influx of drugs into Alaska. Uh, it's funny as a rookie, your field training officers tell you, kind of calm down, junior. You'll learn the ropes, and this is a marathon, not a sprint. And I kind of laughed when I was 24, thinking that these guys they should get out there and work more. But I realize exactly what they're saying as I progress through my career. It is a marathon, and you do your best, but you're never going to solve crime. You're going to do your best to prevent it, help others, make sure that they're safe. But it's a constant battle, as you know. You can read it in the news and media. So it's a long struggle, but I've done a lot of things in my life besides law enforcement. But if I could only pick one career, it would 100% being a police officer.
Wow. So you had talked a lot about narcotics. When you break down the crime that happens up there in Anchorage, what's the lion's share of what you saw throughout your career that you were battling?
So drugs and alcohol are the biggest factors in Alaska. Keep in mind we have 700,000 residents statewide. Anchorage has about 300,000, but you've got 8 months of winter, very dark, very cold. Uh, you know, can be depressing at times if you're not from here. Uh, it has some beautiful things that you can do as well, but we have a lot of people that come from the lower 48 to live up here, and then they get into drugs, narcotics, they have some depression. That's by far the most calls that I responded to. Uh, I mean, not even close. Domestic violence is also large. Again, that parlays into the drugs and alcohol and then the long winters. But I would say that the drug crimes in Alaska it was a constant battle.
There was a show that Rainn Wilson did on Hulu, I believe it was, and it was like this pursuit of happiness, Dwight from The Office.
Yeah.
And he was trying to find like he just has never quite been happy. So he wanted to go out and look at all these different regions in the world. And the first place he went to was Iceland. And there's something about Anchorage that reminds me of that. I'm sure everywhere you look, there's this landscapes and beauty and all of these things around you. And Iceland has some of the most happy people on the planet. Now, their pharmaceuticals are through the roof because it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, you're battling all this, but their ability to pivot, their ability to see natural beauty and to kind of take their environment that they're around that's beautiful and really make it a part of themselves. Do you see that being a part of the Alaskan way, that there's this beauty that trumps kind of that notion of dealing with the darkness or the cold for all that time?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're an outdoor lover and you come to Alaska or you're born here, it's going to be spot on for you. I think, the Anchorage is our largest city, so then uh, once you get out of the city, that's where you really see the beauty. I mean, it's quite beautiful here, but you get up to Denali, see our highest peak. You get up into Fairbanks areas, or you travel about. But winter we have snow machining, snowshoeing. We have lots of sports, skiing, of course. So there's a ton of things to do. Alaskans are very independent people. I was born in Homer, which is a town of about 5,000, very small, but very friendly state. We're kind of the old school way where you meet your neighbors on the street, knock on the door and say hello. I think a lot of that's gone now, but in Alaska, it's still the same way. So definitely the beauty and the hiking, the adventure in Alaska, whether you like to hunt or fish, there's many things to do, especially if you're born and raised here. I think you naturally grow up with that. I think where I've seen problems is people that move here uh, and aren't used to those long 8-month winters. Sometimes they have some problems.
So let me ask you this. Who's been a consistent hero for you in the work that you've done and even writing this book? Who's been that force in your life?
I'd have to say my wife, Kim. She's always a support to me. We've been involved in entrepreneurship and business in Alaska. She's right by my side, working hard. But she's always with the family. She's very supportive. And law enforcement, when you come home, I was always good at not bringing the job home. You work 10 to 12 hours and you come home and you see a lot of bad stuff. She was always a very positive influence, still is today, of course, and reassuring. So it's good to have that anchor and a family member that supports you. But without question, it would be my wife.
So if you can meet one person alive on the planet right now that you find fascinating, who would that be? Who would you love to meet and talk to?
Some of my friends, I was just golfing on Monday. We have a short golf season here, but they're asking who would I want to golf with. So I'll throw this out. It'd be Tiger Woods. I'd want to play a round of 18 with Tiger Woods. Uh, he would obviously kill me in golf, but I think I would have a good time. And just chatting with him, I think that would be very cool from that perspective. So it's funny you asked that because some of my friends were just talking about that.
You know, it's funny, when I was a kid, there was a show called That's Incredible, and they would have all of these people that were doing these amazing things, and there was a segment on Tiger when he was, like, 8, and he was hanging out with his dad, and he was nailing shots, he was a pro already at that point, but
Yeah.
it was amazing there, and they just kept saying, "This guy's gonna have a bright future ahead of him," and little did they know that he was gonna revolutionize the whole sport as we know.
Yeah, he was absolutely incredible. I mean, just in his heyday, he was just dominating tournaments, winning by 10, 15 shots, which today is, I mean, never see that. So
Yeah.
it'd be fun to play around with him, no doubt.
Y Yeah, what he was doing in the beginning was something that no one ever saw. I mean, even with Jack Nicholson and all those guys, like you know, Tom Watson, who's local here, you never saw that big of a margin, or somebody that just put a different spin on the sport. You know, there was this notion of what a golfer looked like and how they carried themselves. And yeah, he was pretty revolutionary for sure.
Yep, amazing.
So let me ask you this. Talk to me about the book. You know, books are a big deal because it takes, I don't think people that have published one before understand how long it takes. So take me from the inception of this idea to
Sure.
when it actually got put in your hands and it was real.
Yeah, boy, the inception of the idea, we're gonna go back, I mean, nearly 20 years ago. And I'll tell you why is that police officers, we have a lot of dark comedy. We use that, kind of as self-care. It's just the way it goes because you see a lot of trauma. So if you can't keep humor in your life, it becomes depressing for yourself.
Yeah.
So I always had that, and I was, very professional at work. I didn't want to take things too seriously because it's a long career. You see a lot. And I would often tell a lot of these stories at dinner parties or things because people ask you what happened, what about this case, especially in your community. So you would explain to them, and inevitably the stories would come back. Well, what's the strangest thing, the freakiest thing you've seen? They really wanted, citizens and friends and family really want to get into the details, which I found amazing.
Yeah.
So I would tell some of these stories, and eventually they tracked into some of the most deviant sexual stories in Alaska in my career. And they would ask about them, they would dig into the details, and I was like, wow, you guys want to know a lot for this. And interestingly, at these, parties or dinner parties, the wives would be the ones that would dig in the most, which I found fascinating, into the gory details of those crimes. And I would tell them about them. And, inevitably they said, well, you should write a book someday. So I thought about it, and obviously, with my career ongoing with Anchorage Police Department, they're probably not going to let me publish a book about some of the most deviant cases in Alaska. So I had to wait till post career. So although the idea started 20 years ago, it was didn't come to fruition until now. I'll tell you about the journey. Is I thought it would be very quick to write this book post retirement, get it to a publisher, publish it, get it out to society, and that's a wrap. As you kind of alluded to, that was incorrect thinking on my part. It was extremely difficult. The first thing was finding a publisher. I think there were 6 publisher interviews where I met with them, either their upper management on Zoom, in person, where they said, "We like your book idea. We like your book. We can't publish it. It's a little too extreme for us. So thanks, but no thanks." I was, a little bit heartbroken because I'm like, I think I had a great book. So I go on to the next and the next. That process probably took 18 months until I found a publisher that said, "Oh, certainly we'll publish your book."
Yeah.
And then from there, it's about a year to get everything together, get the editing, make it a professional piece. And so the book finally came out, but it was a long, long process for sure. And I do appreciate working with the publisher. And when I say the book's graphic, I don't want, listeners to think it's too graphic where I can't read it. It's just the real deal on sexual deviant cases, some of the most extreme. So these are factual cases laid out. Very interesting read. It's a different twist on true crime. I love true crime. I was a cop for 25 years. I worked a lot of homicides, negotiated with serial killers. I've done it all, but there's a lot of true crime books out there. So I thought my book, I'd give it a little different flavor on true crime to make it stand out from the others. So it's an interesting read. I think it'll be shocking. I always tell people that you're never going to look at your neighbors the same way, your coworkers, and it'll be hard to visit the grocery store after you read my book. So It's interesting, but it's going to be a different flavor.
Well, if you look at the realm of podcasting, the whole realm of crime and suspense along those lines is that's the number one. And women love it. There's a thing that calms them down. And it's a weird double-edged sword because they're the ones that get the most freaked out about having to be protected when they go out into the world. But they're the ones
Yeah.
that are attracted to the neon lights.
Yeah, it's incredible. They're the ones that would, like I said before, dig into the details of the most goriest cases ever committed. And I was always fascinated by that because I would have thought they wouldn't have, but they were the ones asking the most questions. And I think realistically for my book that sweet spot will probably be, women who like true crime. And there's a lot of fetishes in my book. There's a chapter called Teachable Tidbits. This is an interesting chapter. That's one where I've seen some things done investigatory where, sexually based that people probably could incorporate in their lives that they've never thought about that aren't criminal. So at the very end, I give a little fun chapter for readers because the book's pretty intense, pretty strong.
Yeah.
So that's a fun chapter, and I think people will enjoy that.
So was it cathartic to do this? I would imagine after all of that time and everything you saw, to be able to come up with something that encapsulates all of that time, that's really captivating people. Was there a level of it that was relieving and cathartic for you?
It was certainly. I even, I mentioned it in the book because some of these stories are pretty raw and strong. I mentioned that very fact that although maybe painful for the reader, it's cathartic for me because you know, it's true when if you see something bad, you want other people to see it and you to think about it and to understand it. So it was. I mean, I think in my career I was very good at separating law enforcement from personal life and not carrying that baggage with me. And to this day, I think I'm still the same way. But it was fun to write it. I think people will be shocked about what happens in their community. Now, most of these cases, about 80% are from Alaska, and 20% are from my workings with other departments in the US, where I've incorporated a few of their cases, similar to the ones we've had in Alaska. But it was fun to do. I think it'll be a real interesting read and much different than what people expect.
So I would imagine being in this line of work, being an officer and being in law enforcement for that long has to be a grind every day. What was it that got you up out of bed every day, no matter what, and continually did this job to retire from? What was that inspiration, that gas in your tank, so to speak?
It was the job changed every day. Alaskans, we like outdoors, we like adrenaline. I think a lot of us look for you know, I do a lot of extreme sports. So I think law enforcement fit right in for me because it was an adrenaline rush every day. It changed every day. So you never knew what you were going to get. Uh, I reference in one of my stories that law enforcement's like the Forrest Gump quote, life's like a box of chocolates. It was each and every day. You never know what you're going to be doing. I could be on patrol and be in a helicopter 5 minutes later, which had happened to me before, looking for a homicide suspect, looking for a body. I could be hiking up a mountain. You just never knew from day to day what you were doing. So I think that really kept it exciting for me. Uh, I told my wife, not too long ago that I'd certainly miss law enforcement, and I love the aspect of exactly what I'm explaining now, that it was constantly changing. It was fun, exciting. You learned every day, and if you wanted to be a good cop, you had to learn every day. You had to have continual education, whether it's courses on negotiating, homicide investigation, crime scene investigation. So it was constant. You had to keep yourself up to date on every new training. Never a dull moment in law enforcement. I loved it. I wouldn't do anything else if I had to do it over again.
So what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
I think I'll go back to that FTO in my junior days, uh, and where he said that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon in law enforcement. I think that was really good advice. It took about 4 months for that to sink in when I realized I wasn't going to solve all the crimes in the world in 4 months. So it took about 4 months to sink in. And then I think that was for myself, my own mental health. I think that helped me because I realized that tomorrow's a new day. You're not going to solve every case the first day. And I didn't hold those cases with me like I did when I was a junior officer. I was on to the next, and it might take a week to solve a case, and that's okay. You don't have to solve it right away. So I think those words that he gave me really helped me in my career. Didn't realize it at the time, but it certainly sunk in later.
So of all of these things that you've done and accomplished in your career, what are you the proudest of?
Uh, I I think 25 years of serving my community in Anchorage, and again, I was born in Homer, but I grew up in this area. I I don't know all 300,000 people in Anchorage, but I know a lot. So I think that being there, interacting with the community, contributing, I think that's the most rewarding by far. I wouldn't change it. I have a business side to me that I enjoy, uh, you know, but I don't think that anything could trump law enforcement.
So everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, all of your readers, everyone that knows you, but you ultimately lead the charge. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Uh, I think meeting me here or meeting me as a cop in uniform, there'd be no difference. I was a really fun uh, cop. I was very polite to people. As long as we're not into a homicide or a shootout, we're gonna get along just fine. I wasn't that officer that wanted to put it to the citizen ever. I worked for the citizens. As a matter of fact, I would train officers for a long part of my career, and I always reminded them, remember who you work for, right? You remember why you're here is you work for the community. So our job is to go out and protect the community. If somebody's violating the law, then you arrest them. But other than that, we need to be polite, courteous, and work in tandem with the community. And I think Anchorage has a great department, and I know it fluctuates and changes throughout the nation depending where you're at. But really, we're very community focused here. Law enforcement is well respected in Alaska, should be everywhere. But I think that all officers should remember that. So I think for me, you would have a nice interaction with me. You wouldn't know a big difference from meeting me in my personal life or as a cop. I'm not much different, again, unless we have a serious situation. That might be a little different, but that's my takeaway. I think that's why I believe I was a good cop during my 25 years. I think the community thinks so, but I think that was a big portion of it.
So if anyone wants to get the book, if they want to reach out, they want to learn more about your career, any of the good business, where can they go?
Yeah, the book's available. It just went live on July 16th, so pretty new. Called 50 Shades of Crime, so it's on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. It'll be coming to most stores throughout the US. You can also visit my website, which is just dougpfeiffer.com, and Fifer spelled Fifer. You can order from the website. Uh, I think your listeners will love the book. It's quite interesting. It'll be something they never read before. The reviews are starting to trickle in now, very positive so far on being a different read than people expect.
Right on. Doug, this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your service. Best of luck with the launch.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Take care.